So around 3 months ago, I've replaced this with this. And quite a lot happened. Like many others nowadays, I owned a pile of books that I really wanted to read, but for some reason I kept getting distracted. There was always something more important, and looking at my screen time, it wasn't difficult to find the perpetrator: social media. At first, I tried many different methods to lower my screen time and read more. I even used to put my phone under a book so that I broke the pattern of seeking my phone and immediately going on Instagram. That's also the thing with addictions, they often rely on patterns. And by putting the book on top of the phone, I broke the patterns so that when I eventually went to look for my phone, I reached for the book first. And it worked a little bit, but honestly, it's a half measure. Social media, at the end of the day, is really addicting. And you're never going to stop using, for example, cocaine if you always accept that you'll be using just a little bit of it. I'm not sure if that's the answer for social media, but it is the one that seems to be working for me. And when I finally uninstalled Instagram from my phone, and I was never using TikTok to begin with, I finally started seeing some real benefits. And I was also averaging at least one full book per month. And it's not an insane number, but it's a huge improvement over what it used to look like. So here's what happened first. I was immediately surprised by how quickly improvements started appearing. Pretty much immediately after uninstalling, I immediately felt much less pressure from around me. Maybe it's also connected to the circumstances of when I uninstalled Instagram, but I was really done with constantly hearing what I should do, at looking at what others are doing, wondering whether that's something I should be doing or if what I'm currently pursuing is even right. And all of those complex thoughts that many of us are familiar with. So since now all of those voices were quiet, the very next day I was already wondering what I should do with my time. There were many moments when, out of habit, I reached for my phone and I looked for the Instagram app. But when I noticed it wasn't there, I actually started reflecting about what I want to do today. And since one of my goals was reading more books, I started reaching for the new novel I bought. Back then, I believe it was Red Rising. Over time, I was getting more and more used to the long format of reading. My brain started switching from the short form, very engaging content to getting interested in a long narrative. And it eventually got to the point where I finished the final 200 pages of the first book of Red Rising in a single day. I was reading it until 2 a.m., just like I used to when I was a kid. Then, some other day, I was reading a news article at work, doing some research, and I noticed I can focus much longer on the article and I am better at recalling the information. It also became a bit easier to endure the full 8 hours of the workday. I wasn't so impatient and it wasn't as draining as it used to be. The next thing I noticed, let's say around 2 months after I quit social media, is how much I could actually remember. Because when you switch to long form content, you spend a lot of time with a single idea. And since there is not as much stimulation, your brain has more time to process what you're reading. And as a result, you end up remembering much more for much longer. Like I can still recall the entire plot of Red Rising from the first two books. I can recall the concepts of probability and epistemology that I read about in Nassim Taleb's Black Swan, and many other kinds of knowledge. And now we're getting closer to the present day, where recently I've ordered the Odyssey by Homer, which I never thought I would be into classics, but I grew up on Percy Jackson, and I guess if I was ever to reach for a classic, it would be the Odyssey. But it's also the English version of the book, and I'm not actually a native speaker. I'm not sure how noticeable it is. I hope not that much. But yeah, as part of the practice for this YouTube video, I'm reading it in English. I've also been reading Red Rising in English, and I've noticed some improvements already. But the second reason why I picked this book is to gain more knowledge. When I started noticing this pattern of, hey, when I read more long form content, like the books are the ultimate long form content. Nowadays, we refer to long form content as YouTube videos, at least usually. But it's a really satisfying feeling when at any point in time you can recall so many concepts, so many characters, narratives, and so many, I guess, philosophical ideas. Books are often based on different kinds of themes, and in most good books, those themes can actually relate very well to real life. I guess this entire channel is about books and stories and how they relate to our everyday lives. So eventually, all of those habits and this interest towards stories and books started turning into a sort of hunger for more knowledge or wisdom. There is some debate about what's the difference between intelligence, knowledge, and wisdom. Maybe I will talk about this topic in another video. It's something I would have to research more. But I guess the message behind this whole video is that if you're someone who's been thinking about doing something similar, if you're tired of social media, if you constantly find yourself delaying your favorite books, and if you constantly find yourself getting distracted and your attention span decreasing, then maybe you also want to give it a shot. You can make it a sort of challenge. 1 month where you replace social media with books. And if you don't like it, you can always install all of those apps back again. When you used to be a kid, you probably didn't have those apps and life was still going fine. And honestly, there is a good chance that, just like me, once you uninstall those apps, you might not want to install them again. I find myself living pretty comfortably, or I guess I should say a much happier and I guess healthy life without using Instagram. I mean, I guess I still log on from my laptop sometimes. I still have to sometimes use it as part of my work, but most of the time it's simply not there. I don't scroll anymore. I don't really consume much of the content, and I've only seen benefits so far. And if you end up trying it, feel free to let me know how it went. See you next time.